Hello, hello. Welcome back. This is Leading Women in Tech. I'm your host, Tony Collis, and I have just recorded a fabulous interview with Madeleine Lambert, who I'm going to get on in just a moment. In this episode, we did some coaching. I've not done this before the show, and it didn't go where I thought it was going to go. I just say that up front. This was a real mixture of coaching and mentoring, which is something I'm very passionate about doing. I don't think we should just coach. We should also, if we have expertise, we should mentor. Which is why I think sometimes people get very frustrated with coaching when it's just about asking questions. I'm a huge believer we can solve our own problems, but sometimes we need to give some advice. And today, Madeleine opened up about balancing work and family life, those family dynamics, the work dynamics, how she feels guilty, how she shits all over herself, as I call out partway through. And we touch on how she's second guessed. We've touched on why she shouldn't have to have it full figured out. And we talked about some real tactics to use on a daily basis to help her feel more in control. So without further ado, let's get Madeleine onto the show. Welcome to the show, Madeleine.
Hi, thank you so much.
Oh, it's an absolute delight having you here. But let's start with the very important question of your career journey to date, those important highlights, lowlights, and how you came to work at Originality and why it's so important to you. A little about what you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess if we're going way back, I guess my career started in 2013. When I started working at a medical technology startup in Toronto. And I was hired on as originally as the customer service person, representative to sort of, it was entry-level job. I was number 4 in the company. Like, it was a super, super small startup. And that was such a great experience because I got to work at a technology company from like the ground up. And it was like my first real exposure to like working within an entrepreneurial organization. So I worked right with the founder and a very, very small team. So I got to see like all of the moving parts. And as the company grew, I got to sort of like grow with it. And so that was like my first exposure to, I guess, entrepreneurship. Despite the fact that it wasn't me, I wasn't the entrepreneur behind it. I was the, customer service rep that was hired on at $30,000 a year. So very, very entry level. But it was great. So after that, I decided to move to a small town where my, then boyfriend, now husband, was living. And so I made the move, but it was obviously a very scary move because, there weren't a whole lot of jobs available in Collingwood, is what it's called. And so I just happened to cross paths with somebody who had started like an online business and was looking for somebody to come and help him with his online businesses. And that person is John Gillam, who is the founder of Originality, and who I've been working with for like 8 years now. So at that point, he hired me on. He was like, look, I have these like websites, they're affiliate websites. I'm looking to grow them, get lots of content built or published onto them so that they'll rank well. So I was basically like a content VA for him for a long time. And then within a few months, I was like, okay, kind of like nailed this, kind of worked myself out of a job because I proceduralized it so tight that like the content was just being written and published kind of on autopilot. And then we were like, hey, let's wrap this process up into like a service and sell it. So that's where Content Refined, our content marketing agency, was born. And so that was in 2016. And, we built that and it eventually sold in 2022. So We did a pretty nice exit, and it was a content marketing agency that specialized in creating content specifically for ranking on search engines for affiliate website owners.
Well, tell me a little bit about where you are today, because I know one of the things we're going to come to in a minute is your decision to step back a little bit when you had your third child.
Yes.
So what happened? What's going on today?
Well, so now I work, I guess that kind of comes into the storyline. So basically, I went off on maternity leave with my third in 2022, which kind of coincided with the timing at which we sold. We saw the wave of generative AI coming, and we said, hey, we can either like weather this storm or like get pulverized by Gen AI, which most marketing agencies have, or content marketing agencies have, or we can like look to sell. And we actually had an interested buyer that just like happened to be scooping up marketing agencies at that time. And it just worked out. And so the business closed literally the week after my daughter was born. And so while I was away on mat leave, John, my business partner, was thinking about different ways to kind of get in front of this Gen AI problem that he saw coming for marketing agencies. And that's where he started building Originality, which is AI detection software that detects text that has been generated by large language models like ChatGPT.
Wow.
So it's able to detect what's human written and what's written by an LLM. And then when I came back from my mat leave, he hired me on as the head of marketing for it.
Wow. I mean, that's quite a big change after being a co-founder to now being hired on. And again, I think this touches on the coaching conversation, which, everybody listening, Madeleine has agreed to be coached by me live today, which is a huge gift to all of you to see what it's like to be coached. But this comes to the heart of what we're talking about, because there was a reason why you went in as a head of marketing rather than as a founder. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there's a few reasons for that. One of which was that, being the co-founder of something, for me at least, I was responsible for pretty much everything. I was responsible for, I was client facing. I was doing all of the marketing. I was doing all, getting all of our clients. I was doing all of the sales. So it was one of those things where, if a month wasn't looking good revenue wise, it like really affected me. And it was like, okay, I'm going to put, 50 more hours in this week and just get it done and get hungry for sales. But I have a bit more of a limitation now. I have, a family that I want to be present for, and I want to be able to go home and, not stress about numbers so much. So that was a bit of a play, be an employee again and be able to kind of reset and come back to the workforce and be able to leave my work at home a little bit more was kind of a factor in that.
Well, let's talk about you. Let's talk about where you are right now and this balancing act. This is what we're going to talk about for your coaching conversation that you're sharing with us or gifting us all, in my view. And this balancing act between work, your ambition, your family, because it is a balancing act. And I think people talk about work-life balance, and a lot of us love to hate that phrase or think it's not possible or think it's a misnomer. But let's talk about you, and let's start with, where have you second guessed yourself on what you should be doing every day? What shows up for you when you're thinking, I don't know what to prioritize? I'm ambitious, but there's my kids. What do you do? Tell me what's going on.
Oh gosh. Well, full disclosure, I do not have it figured out at all.
Yeah.
I feel quite unbalanced in most areas of my life. But I think, I don't know, once you have kids, like for me at least, my kids are very much my number one priority, and they're always going to come first, and everything else can wait. But at the end of the day, you still have deadlines. You still have tasks that need to get done. And yeah, I find myself in a very stressful season of life where the priorities are always conflicting, and they're always, they're always climbing on top of one another, you know? So I have not figured out, and I would be lying if I said I did.
Yeah. And that's why I applaud you for having this honesty, both with yourself and with the audience here, because not having figured out, I think, is the majority of us, but most of us think we should all have it figured out. So tell me, like on a typical day when you're saying they're all like climbing on top of each other, what is some of the narrative going on in your brain? Like, are you know, what is it you're telling yourself that you should have figured out, or that you should know how to do this better, or how are you beating yourself up essentially?
I mean, it's constant, right? So what I tend to do is sit down at the beginning of the day and like write out like a list of shit that I need to do. And it's everything. It's work related, it's kid related, it's family related. It's a very long list. And then I try to sort of like prioritize them by like, hey, things that actually need to get done today, things that can get done by the end of the week, and things that need to be done sort of like overall by the end of the month. And I just try to block time off to try to prioritize things that way. But yeah, it's hard because like things that are mundane, like things like, you know, I need to go grocery shopping so that I can like meal prep for the week. That's like an important thing.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Got to feed everybody. Do you feed yourself?
Everybody. Yes, exactly. It's something that has to be done. But it's hard when you have like, hey, this digital PR piece that needs to get launched on like Monday morning. You know, these are things that have different like levels of like importance, I guess, but constantly compete. So it's tough. Yeah. It's really, really hard to figure it out. People are like, oh, you know, get a nanny, get somebody to help you do this, like help you with the day to day, which is great. And I would love to be able to do that, but we live in Canada, and have you seen this economy? Like,
I know. I mean, I'm a big believer in is outsourcing what we can, but there's a financial limitation to that, right? Like, you can't outsource everything.
And I find that like going home after a day at work and like, you know, cooking for my family and just like having them around while I'm doing something like that, I find that therapeutic, and I like that. I enjoy it. It makes me feel human, you know, after a long day of like sitting and working on different, you know.
Well, okay, so let's take a specific example there of you feeling that you need to get this work thing done, because it's quite clear to me from what you just said that actually going home is therapeutic. And I wonder if this is what? I'm sorry. What were you saying?
No, I'm just envisioning my kids like absolutely pulverizing one another.
Not therapeutic.
Therapeutic.
Well, because I often see one of two tensions in most of us. One is the tension of, I really want to do more of this work stuff, but I've got all these family commitments. And it's always putting everybody before your ambition. Or sometimes it's an and/or, and they can be both. Or it's that you're struggling with the basic stuff around the house. You're putting the company first. You're doing the work, and you're then feeling guilty around, I didn't go to the kids' soccer game. I didn't get tea on the table early enough tonight. Whatever it is, like, where do you feel? Do you have a natural one or the other? Is it both? You're feeling guilty about both things.
100% guilty about both things at all times. So it's like these, it's not one or the other. These things coexist together all the time. And yeah, it's tough.
Okay, let's take some hypotheticals here. So this is gonna maybe make you a little bit uncomfortable. That's my goal here, because my goal is to make you uncomfortable. That's how we get breakthroughs. So envision yourself tonight failing to make your kids' dinner. What will happen?
We'd order pizza.
And
And then I'd feel probably guilty about the money that was spent on
mm-hmm.
the pizza, and the fact that it's packed with preservatives and yada yada yada, and like I feel for sure guilty about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you'd have all that guilt there from I mean, I was going to say, what is the worst thing that can happen if your kids get pizza? But the food industry is the whole thing.
Yeah.
The food industry has a lot to answer for, and like I can't use that anymore. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Yeah, my kids end up in a terrible place because of food. That's a whole other conversation for another day, I tell you.
There's lots of books about that.
Oh yeah. Okay, so then let's take the other side of the equation. What if you've got something due on Monday morning, and what if you don't meet that deadline because you decide you're going to finish work every day at 5 and you're going to be fine with that? What's the worst thing that can happen?
Well, in the position that I'm in now, it doesn't look good for it doesn't look good in terms of what I'm supposed to be doing for work. If I'm not hitting deadlines, I'm not doing my job. John and I are good friends at this point, but there are expectations, and I need to submit things when they're due.
Well, so this is what I want to challenge you on, because I think a lot of us have work scope creep in that we are unrealistic about what we can do in a week. There comes a point where we all go, I just need to sleep right now, right?
Yeah.
There comes a point where there is no more to do. But we've reached that point rather than the point of, I've done 40 hours this week, which is actually the optimal point for productivity. So my question really becomes, if you are finding you cannot do this, is this about prioritization or is this about unrealistic workloads? And that unrealistic workloads may well be self-imposed. It doesn't mean it's your boss.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say unrealistic workloads and giving yourself a workload that maybe used to be realistic, but isn't anymore, and failing to adjust to like a new normal for what you can manage. My mental capacity is very different than it used to be, right?
Let's just challenge that one as well for a second. I'm all about challenging you. You say normal for who I am today. Is that because genuinely it's your mental capacity, as in you're, sleep deprived, all that? Or is it you're no longer able to work an extra 50 hours a week above what you should have done because you've got 3 kids?
I think it's a bit of both. I have a very different mental capacity than I used to have. Like I'm thinking about 50 other things while I'm also trying to focus on work. And it results in me not, getting as much done in a week that I feel I should. And yeah, so and then it leads into like a kind of like snowball effect where I feel like I'm underperforming, even if I'm not, because I've got all of these other things that I'm thinking about at all times.
So I think we're getting to the crux of the issue here, which is all these other things, because what's going to be going on with that, right, is you're constantly caching, which means you're not going to sleep as well. Anything you tackle, you're noticing at work, anything you tackle, you're not doing as quickly or as efficiently. But you also have this narrative of, I need to make up for it, which probably means you're working longer, which means this stuff is churning in your head. So I think this is the first thing to tackle of let's get rid of those 50 things you're constantly thinking about, 100 things you're constantly thinking about. Find out a way to hold that somewhere else that's not in your brain. Yeah. If you could do that, would that make a difference?
Absolutely.
How would it impact your sleep? Or would it not?
Probably would be medicating myself to sleep. Just joking, sort of.
Is the medication your favorite drink and chocolate? That counts.
No, it's I usually take like a melatonin to help me get to sleep, but and turn off my brain. Yeah, I just don't like practically. I just like from a practical standpoint, I just don't know how to do that. Right? Like,
I think that's the first thing to tackle. I think so many of us struggle with this. And actually, I think this happens even if it's not kids. As we take on more responsibility in our lives, and if it wasn't kids, it'd be work. And a lot of us, it's both, right? But as you do that, there are just small things. A lot of people think it is because you've become a parent. I've seen this irrespective of people being parents. We take on more as we get older and we're holding more stuff. And when we were in our 20s, we could hold a dozen things. As we get older, we are expected to hold more things. We have more responsibilities, but we tell ourselves it's because I'm getting older or because I've got kids. In reality, you are holding a ton more than you did in your 20s because your life has become more complex. In your case, you've got a kids, you've got a partner, you've got a high profile job, but there's all sorts of things. It could just be the job. You've bought a house. That's a whole level of stuff. We start paying into pension plans, savings. There's so much we hold that we didn't when we were 22.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of this is recognizing we can't just hold it. We can't just keep it in our heads and expect our heads to not explode. So we need tactics to deal with this. Do you write any of, I know you brain dump the to-do list.
Yeah.
Do you have any other mechanisms for, like, whenever you've got these 50 things you're thinking of, do you write any of it down?
No, sometimes if I've got like, when it comes to like appointments and due dates and stuff like that, if something comes up or if I get like, an email with a new project with like a specific due date or to do associated with it, I have an app that I will throw it into so that it will like send me reminders, or else it's just like gone. So I use that, but aside from that, not really. And then brain dump on the like the to-do list every morning.
Do you have stuff flitting around your head while you're talking to me? Do you like, oh, I've got to go pick this up on the way home, or should I do that or that for dinner? Give me 5 things right now that are flitting around your head.
For sure. So I have a brick and mortar. I have 2 brick and mortar businesses as well on the side. So I have to do payroll this afternoon before 5 o'clock. So that's flittering in my head. I've got to figure out what I'm making for supper tonight. I need to make sure that my kids are dressed for comfy cozy day on Friday at school, their theme day. I need to make sure that my daughter has diapers for tomorrow at daycare. And what else was flittering around my head? And I need to top up credits on my data analyst's account for originality. So that was literally just floated through my head within the last 5 minutes.
And is any of that written down anywhere?
No. Comfy cozy day is, because that's my calendar.
But is your problem there that you've got to it's in your calendar for Friday, but you've got to remember to do stuff before Friday?
Mm-hmm.
So have you got an action written down to make sure it happens? Is that part of the problem here?
No, I don't have an action written down.
So I think we're getting to the crux of it, which every one of us struggles with, which is you've got this kind of amorphous list, and it's things like comfy cozy day. It's in the calendar, so it should be taken care of. So okay, but your brain's like, and I need to, right? And
the pajamas are washed. Make sure that know. And
the problem is what we do is our brains basically we think of a thing. And then our brain goes, oh, I've got to just keep that in cache. And it keeps bringing it top of mind, which means you're not going to be able to focus on what you're doing. The worst is when you're also poorly slept. And I had this earlier today because I did not get a good night's sleep earlier. And I found myself in the habit of I wasn't writing stuff down. I'm going to come to the writing down in a minute. And I was flitting between all the different things. And I'm like, wow, because it means you just can't focus on anything. So
like mental switching constantly.
Mental switching. I view this as, for those of us who are computer nerds, it's like the threads in a computer, right? You swap threads in and out. They don't actually all run at the same time. You swap your threads in and out. They just spin waiting until you bring it back to the surface. Your brain's just doing that. If your brain is full of life admin, it's no wonder it can't do anything useful. Which is why it takes 10 times longer to do stuff at work, right?
Totally. And I feel like with work in particular, I feel like I flick things along enough that they move in the right direction. But I feel like it takes me forever to get things like executed to completion in the way that I want it to.
Yes. And that's because you're constantly just in and out of all these things. And so, I mean, that's another conversation, I think, but just like a quick tip for you. it's worth working on building blocks for a specific project and acknowledging that other stuff is going to fall behind to tick something off. We work better in bigger blocks, generally speaking. Even people who have ADHD, we work better in big blocks than we do with flitting between things. Flitting between things, that context switching is really, really expensive. Mm-hmm. Basically, what you're doing with all this stuff in your head right now is constant context switching. Your brain's like, and, and you go through the whole circle. So what we need to do is come up with a process for you to kind of let go of this. So the easiest way is to write it down. The app on your phone gives me pause. I'm a huge believer in technology. That's what I do. That's what I love. But your phone is too much of and I'll just get distracted by something else. Mm-hmm. It's a source of distraction in its own right. But also when you pick up your phone, it's going to remind you of 10 other things that you haven't done that you were going to use your phone for, whether it's banking or shopping or the to-do list that's on there. So we don't really want to use our phones as a way to capture this. I am a huge believer of piece of paper and a pen. And actually, this is the one I've got for today. There's only 2 items on it at the moment, which I'm really quite proud of. But what you do is you literally have a scrap piece of paper with you all day long that sits next to you and a pen. Something flits in your head, it gets written down. But you've then got to promise yourself you're going to do something with it, because this only works if your brain feels like, and she's got it. That's taken care of. Your brain has to trust it's taken care of. So if we go back to the cozy comfy day, your brain doesn't trust it's taken care of right now. Mm-hmm. So what could you write down so that your brain is like, and she's got this. I'm going to take care of that later. What would let your brain let go of it? What's the action you need to take?
Make sure that they're like clean and ready to go. It sounds so silly saying it out loud. Like,
there's so much judgment there, isn't there? This is the problem. You're like, I can't write that down because I've got to, like, isn't it obvious that my kids are clean and ready? No, it's not obvious that kids are clean and ready to go. They can be dirty within 30 seconds, maybe even less.
Yeah.
Maybe your brain needs to write that down, and you've got to stop the self-judgment which says don't write it down, because your brain is holding on to this. Mm-hmm. So if you write that down, the key thing is then at some point later today, you've got to then go in and deal with that list. Now, deal with that list is put it in your calendar, add it to tomorrow's to-do list. It might be figure out what to cook for the kids is literally like, I need a minute while I make my next coffee. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And then write down the decision. So your brain doesn't like, are you sure you want to make lasagna for dinner? That sounds kind of boring. Or you don't revisit it in such a way. So when are you going to tackle such a list? If you've been compiling a list all day, when are you going to sit down and figure out how you're going to deal with all these things?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Like I will. So if I actually lift, like, do you mean sort of like the brain dump at the beginning of the day? Like, when am I actually?
This is different from the brain dump. The brain dump is a action of, I'm going to get all this stuff out of my head, which I love. I think that is a beautiful thing. And that is kind of the similar process, but you're forcing it out. This list, maybe it gets added to the brain dump. I don't know. Maybe it's the start of tomorrow's brain dump. But this list is it's come up during the day. I add to it every time I have a meeting. Something pops in my inbox. It might be the thing in my inbox, or it might be that that's triggered another thought that my brain just goes, oh, I'm that thing. And I'm like, okay, I've got to call the doctors. I don't know why I just thought of that just now, but I did. Right. That goes on the list. Yeah. So it's kind of like an addition to that brain dump, but it's just to allow your brain to let go of it as the day goes on. So would you want to deal with it tomorrow morning when you deal with the next brain dump? Like, when would be a good time to deal with it?
I think I would feel best if I went to bed knowing that I had like tackled stuff on that list, so that I'm not just like procrastinating and moving it to the next day, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So how much do you think that is kind of like an end of work day thing, and how much of it is a present thing? Because I just want you to not overthink it while you're writing it down. Just have one piece of paper for all the stuff that comes out your head. Not that's work, that's personal.
I think I would love to, that's a good point too. It's like, what's work, what's personal, but like it all coexists in the same hours.
Exactly. So, yes. Yeah.
With work, I want to get stuff done during my work hours, you know, and have a clear focus on work-related tasks during work hours. I don't want to go home and be like, oh, I forgot to do that. I can jump on for 10 minutes and just do it now, which is something I often do. So, yeah, any like annoying little mundane things that I need to get done for work, I want to get into the habit of doing them before I go home.
So how would it feel to have 30 minutes? And this is kind of like going on to another technique, but how would it feel to have 30 minutes at the end of the day where you've wrapped up all the work minutiae and that was like golden in your calendar, non-negotiable, nobody can book a meeting?
Yeah.
Could you do that?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think it would be, closer to like an hour.
Fair dues. I mean, start where you want to start. My goal is if you start doing this, most people see a reduction in the noise after some time, because a lot of the noise is repetitive. And if you have a process for dealing with it, your brain is like, oh, I don't need to mention that. She's already got hold of that. So you might find initially you need an hour and then it reduces. We'll see. That's what I would say. Does that feel?
And then the to-do list for like home stuff within like the first hour after work.
Right.
Is when I would want to like crush that list so that it's just like done and I can go and enjoy my evening with my kids without thinking about 1,000 different things.
I love that. Okay, so I want you to try that process. I want you to have the permission to brain dump really strange, irrational things, no judgment, let it out. An hour before the end of the work, you split that list into work and play. I say play, personal. Everything in our personal life should be played, and definitely laundry is not play.
You know what? I have like a weird love-hate with laundry. There are times where I'm just like, leave me alone, family. I'm folding laundry. And it's like a therapeutic process for me. And then there's times where it just like sits in a pile for like weeks on end. And then my husband, is like, he does let me set the record straight. He does way more laundry than I do. But my own laundry pile will sit there like for weeks and he'll be like, okay, I'm going to do this for you now.
Oh, bless him. I just detest laundry, but I don't trust my husband with the washing machine. So it's kind of.
Oh, I think, we have the opposite. He definitely doesn't. He is definitely better at laundry than I am. It's funny.
Oh, the things the world is hearing on this podcast episode, I tell you. So I want you to start with that. Spend that hour splitting those lists out, doing the work triage stuff. Give yourself permission for anything big to go on your work to-do list, to go into your calendar, whatever that looks like. That hour is not to do 100 million things. That hour is to triage.
Yeah.
But then equally, the same thing happens when you get home. You've got this personal to-do list. If it's like, it includes like call the doctor, that might not happen till the next day. So put it in your calendar for the next day so your brain feels it's taken care of. What we need to do is find ways for your brain to feel like this is taken care of.
Yeah.
And I want you to do that for a couple of weeks, then maybe come back to me and tell me how that's gone. Because then we're going to see, like, what does that uncover? Does that mean you're just filling up your brain more? That's unlikely, but does sometimes happen. Does it feel like you've got more guilt? Or does it feel like, okay, I feel more in control, but now I'm trying to work more? Like, what's the next thing that shows up? This is a little bit of triage to get to the point where you can feel like a little bit more sanity, a little bit more control, and then we see what else turns up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I'll give it a go.
Give it a go and let me know. I love this because this is not where I thought this conversation was going to go. I love this. So what would you say is the biggest takeaway from this?
Well, I think what I already knew is that my brain is just like one large, garbage dump of like intermingling priorities, right? Work and play. And then I have to better sort them and compartmentalize them in different categories for sure.
Okay. I'm just gonna challenge you on that. I should compartmentalize. No, there's no shoulds around here. You're shitting all over yourself, as my coach would say. You're shitting all over yourself. Let's let go of that. Whenever you have that language of I should, I could, I must, I want you to see if you can catch yourself, because that's part of this feeling like you haven't figured it out, feeling that you could have it all, but you don't have it all. There's a lot of negative self-talk, especially as a mum when you're tired. I think we all do this, but I think it gets even worse because society is constantly telling you should do all these things as a parent. No, there's no shoulds around here at all. There is just like, what am I doing today? How am I getting on with that? Would I do it differently if I could? Maybe. Is there a lesson to learn there rather than I should have done this differently? I could have done this differently. It's like, is there a lesson to learn? And that's everything there is to it. Okay. I want to ask you my favorite quickfire questions that I ask every guest, even though we've had a fun conversation. Are you up for that?
Sure.
Okay. What is the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
You can't run a business when you have a family. It's hard, but you certainly can.
Oh, 100%. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Because it would be very easy actually for this conversation to sound like you can't run a business and have a family. And that's not what this is about.
No, that's not what this is about at all. No, you can absolutely do it. You just need clearly some better tools in the toolbox to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
That everything is temporary.
I love it.
Everything is temporary. Nothing is permanent.
That's so true. And we learn so much from that. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
That nothing is permanent and everything is temporary.
I love that so much. Life is just a journey.
Given to me a couple months ago by the guy that owns this co-working place that I work out of. And I was stressed about something. And he was like, hey, this is entrepreneurship. This is, everything, nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary. It's a season. This too shall pass. And you know what? I often tell when, and I mean, going back to like motherhood, any time that my kids went through a particularly tough period of time as a baby or what have you, that was always what my mom would tell me too. She's like, it's a season. This too shall pass. Your kids aren't going to be, crying every 45 minutes for the rest of their lives. Like, this is just a season. So, and same with entrepreneurship, same with work.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Love that so much. How can people find out more about you, more about Originality and what your company does? How can we find you online?
Yeah. So we have a pretty solid LinkedIn following at Originality. And we've got a Facebook group if you, care to understand a little bit more about generative AI and detecting it. And we've got a YouTube channel as well where we walk through our software and, it's a good way to find us as well.
Love that. I have to admit, I use generative AI every day, but I think the key is how you use it, right?
I do too. And I'm the director of marketing and sales for this business. I use it all the time as well. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly it. It's about how you're using it and how you're integrating it within your, marketing strategy and making sure that it's not replacing you and, all the good stuff.
Have you any final thoughts you would like to share with the audience today based on our conversation?
Yeah, I guess just like when you're I guess this whole conversation was kind of about navigating multiple different things on your plate. And I think just like the number one thing is keeping your mental health strong and taking care of yourself and and really just attending to your mental health because it's fragile and it can get it can get ruffled easily. So it's important to stay mindful of where you're at and your boundaries and just take care of it.
I love it. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. That was so much fun.
And I just thank you, Madeleine. Thank you, Originality, for getting Madeleine on this show. This is the first time we've done a coaching conversation. I'll admit this was a bit of mentoring, a bit of coaching. That is my style. We don't just coach, we also mentor around here. And this is what it's like to be a woman in tech. It isn't all figured out. It doesn't need to all be figured out. This is about figuring out as we go along and realizing every step of the way you're going to be okay. So I hope you take some inspiration from Madeleine's story today. And I hope you decide that 2025 is the year that you're going to be okay with figuring out as you go rather than having all the answers, that this is the year you're going to stop shitting all over yourself, that this is the year you're going to give yourself permission to finish at 5 p.m. And that maybe, just maybe, this is the year you're going to take on a big ambitious goal and not be afraid of it, because you don't have to do everything today. So listeners, until next time, remember, stay in your tech leadership game and follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.